Anthropic shipped a new Opus today. It's their 4th model release in under 2 months, and it's still not their best one. Claude Opus 5 landed on July 24th, 2026, priced at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million output tokens, exactly what Opus 4.8 already cost. Anthropic's actual best model is still Claude Fable 5, released back on June 9th, over a month earlier, and Anthropic still recommends Fable 5 for the hardest, most complex autonomous work. Opus 5 replaces the mid-tier Opus 4.8, not the flagship. It's a value play, closing most of the gap to Fable 5's intelligence while staying at 4.8's price. That's a real story. Anthropic's new best model is not. On Anthropic's own benchmarks, Opus 5 more than doubles Opus 4.8's score on their Frontier bench coding test at a lower cost per task. On Cursor Bench 3.2, it lands within 0.5% of Fable 5, at half Fable 5's price. On Knowledge Work, Anthropic reports a score 3 times the next best model on ARC AGI 3 and 1.5 times the next best pass rate on Zapier's automation bench. Every one of those numbers comes from Anthropic's own launch post, not an outside lab. For engineering teams running coding agents at scale, that Cursor Bench number, matching Fable 5 within 0.5% at half the cost, is the one that actually matters, not the ARC AGI headline. In science, the clearest gains are organic chemistry, up 10.2 percentage points over Opus 4.8, and protein structure prediction, up 7.7 points. Anthropic also says Opus 5 beats 4.8 on every life sciences evaluation it ran, though these are Anthropic's own internal scores, not an independent audit. On cybersecurity work, Anthropic says its safety classifiers now intervene about 85% less often than they did on Fable 5, meaning fewer false positive refusals on legitimate security research. That's Anthropic's own internal metric, not independently audited. Here's the full spec sheet, side by side. Opus 5 and Opus 4.8 share the exact same price and the same 1 million token context window. Fable 5 costs twice as much on both input and output. The real difference? Opus 5 turns on adaptive thinking automatically. Opus 4.8 only thought if you explicitly asked it to, and neither model supports the manual thinking budget controls Fable 5 does. Migrating from 4.8 is mostly a one-line model swap. Point your model string at Claude Opus 5. The new piece is this effort parameter, low, medium, high, X high, or max, controlling how hard the model thinks before answering. Leave the thinking field out entirely, and Opus 5 still runs adaptive thinking on its own, something Opus 4.8 never did by default. That single change is why old max token settings can suddenly run out of room. Try to disable thinking while effort is set to max or X high, and the API rejects the request outright, a 400 error. Drop effort down to high or below with that same disabled thinking flag, and the identical request goes through fine. That restriction is spelled out in Anthropic's own migration guide, and it'll break any script that reuses 4.8's old settings. 2 things to know before you flip the switch. Thinking tokens now eat into the same max tokens budget as your visible output, so a script tuned for 4.8 can get its answer cut off mid-sentence after the swap. The server-side web fetch tool isn't supported on Opus 5 at all, per Anthropic's own checklist, so any pipeline that leans on it needs a workaround first. Bottom line for anyone maintaining an integration, this is a straight capability upgrade at no extra cost. Same $5 and $25 per million tokens as 4.8, better scores across the board, but budget time for exactly 3 things: rechecking your max token ceiling, rerunning an effort sweep instead of reusing old settings, and testing anything that touches web fetch. I post one of these daily, by the way. Subscribe if local AI interests you. Anthropic is explicit that carried over 4.8 tuning won't be optimal here. It's also live everywhere at once already. The Claude API, Claude DAI, Claude Code, Amazon Bedrock, and Google's Vertex platform. On Claude Max, it's now the default model. On Claude Pro, it's the strongest model available on that plan. One real upgrade here, the minimum prompt length for a cache hit dropped from 1,024 tokens to 512. Send a 600 token system prompt to Opus 4.8, and it can't cache it at all. The minimum wasn't met. Send the identical prompt to Opus 5, and it caches on the very first call. 2 more API changes worth knowing. A new fallbacks parameter can automatically reroute a request to a backup model if Opus 5's cybersecurity safety classifier declines it, instead of just throwing an error back at you. A mid-conversation tool changes beta lets you add or remove tools between turns without invalidating your prompt cache, something that used to force a full cache miss on 4.8. Both are opt-in through beta headers, not on by default. One more behavioral shift the docs flag. Opus 5's default responses run longer than 4.8's, and dropping effort doesn't reliably shorten them. Anthropic recommends adding an explicit conciseness instruction to your system prompt if that's a problem. It also self-verifies its own work without being asked to. So any old double-check your work instruction in your prompts now just causes redundant over-verification. Anthropic's post says Opus 5 surpasses all competitors on its coding benchmark. Not one competitor name or score actually shows up anywhere in the launch materials. Every comparison Anthropic publishes is intra-family. Against Opus 4.8, against Fable 5, against their restricted Mythos 5 model. Artificial Analysis, the independent benchmark firm, hasn't published an intelligence index score for Opus 5. As of today, their page for it just returns a 404. For comparison, their last confirmed score had Fable 5 around 65 and Opus 4.8 around 61. Third-party pages comparing Opus 5 to GPT 5.6 do exist, but they're not vetted independent labs. Treat any specific number on those pages as unverified. This is Anthropic's fourth model release in under 2 months. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 in June, Sonnet 5 right after, now Opus 5 in July. OpenAI shipped GPT 5.6 2 weeks earlier, also priced around cheap token usage. What's actually happening is a cost per task race at the mid-tier, not a race for raw intelligence. Opus 5 also trails Anthropic's own Mythos 5 on biology research and cyber exploitation tasks. Mythos 5 stays restricted access for exactly that reason. Neither lab has published a single head-to-head number against the other's latest model. Opus 5 is 100% closed. No waits, no download, ever. Same as every Claude release before it. The real story here isn't this specific model. It's that two frontier labs are now racing on cost per token at the mid-tier, instead of racing purely on capability. That pressure doesn't open anything up, but it does make a $5 per million token cloud model harder to justify against a model that costs nothing per token once it's already on your own hardware. My take, Opus 5 is worth the swap if you're already paying for Claude by the token. Same price as before, and it closes most of the gap to Fable 5. Skip it if you need Fable 5's manual thinking budget controls or priority tier. Opus 5 supports neither. It also has a newer knowledge cutoff than 4.8, May 2026 versus January 2026, worth knowing if you rely on the model's own recall of recent events. And it's not the story the headline wants. It's not Anthropic's best model. It's not proven to beat any competitor. And it's barely relevant if you're running weights locally. Opus 5 is a real upgrade if you're already paying for Claude by the token, and a total non-event if you're running local. I cover every model drop like this the same day it lands. No fluff, just the numbers that matter. Subscribe if that's useful, and I'll see you in the next one.